Hello and welcome. So, for each of the given equations, determine the direction of opening. Alright, so direction of opening, what we're talking about is we're talking about the graph itself. For all of these are quadratics. You can tell because you have two variables. When you multiply, you'll get a squared, and that'll be the highest exponent, which means it's a quadratic. So, quadratics have this like U-shaped graph. They could be facing up, or they could be facing down. Alright, now if it's facing up, we call its direction of opening is opening up, meaning that your two arrows are facing upwards. Direction of opening, if it's down, you'll see your two arrows going downwards. And that's all it means when it says direction of opening. Alright, so whether or not the U shape is going up or going down. Alright, it's not a quadratic if it's going off to the sides, meaning like if you have something like this going on, right? That's conics, that's something way different, okay? You'll only worry about it going up or down. Alright, so looking at this, I'd say, okay, how can we tell? Well, the biggest thing is that what's going to determine the direction of opening is what we call the leading term. Leading term is the term with the highest exponent. When in standard form, it should be the very first term, and the very first number, the leading coefficient of that term, whether it's positive or negative. Positive, it goes up. Negative, it goes down. Here, 16 is negative, so the direction of opening will be down. Alright, that's standard form. But what if we're not in standard form? What if we're in vertex or factored form? Well, the process is pretty much the same, where the idea is you're generally going to see it facing up or down based off of the number in front. Alright, so for example, that 8 there is a positive number, which means it'll go up. Now let's say that we had like negative z minus 7 squared plus 1, and it was just a negative there. Well, technically that's a negative 1, it would go down. Right? What if there was a negative 4? Down. Positive 4? Up. Alright, so vertex form, it really just depends on that very front number, positive or negative. Alright, for most of what you're going to see in terms of this last form, factored form, generally rule of thumb is that if you have a GCF here, that's a positive number, it'll be going up. If you have a GCF that's negative there, it'll be going down. Now, does that always have to be the case? No, not necessarily. Because if you multiply these out, let's say that we had like negative c plus 14 and then c plus 11. Okay, if that was the case, then if you multiply these out, you'll get negative c squared, which means it would be going down and not up, even if there was a positive number up front. And that will be true, but the rule of thumb is that if your first term is negative, you would have pulled out the negative anyways, which means that if it's been factored correctly, you shouldn't have to worry about that case. Okay, for what's given to you, I would say like 90% of the time, you really only have to worry about the GCF. So same thing as if vertex form was happening. If you had like a 4 out front, positive or negative number, it's positive, it's going up. If it's a negative number, it's going down. So for when it comes to direction of opening, you really only have to look at the very, very, very front number. Okay? Is that positive or negative? Is that positive or negative? Is that positive or negative? Okay, that's going to be the big thing that determines direction of opening. Alright, thanks for watching.